So there was a knight named Arviragus, and he was very much in love with a woman named Dorigen. He did all these things to woo her, and he told her that he wouldn't be the master over her emotions or boss her around, except for in public, because that would cause them shame. She fell in love back with him because she says that women don't like to be bossed around and that freedom is valued. And patience is key in life because nobody is perfect. And so she was glad that he would let her do as she pleased. But Arviragus went to England for 2 years to seek glory, and Dorigen became really, really sad and depressed for a really long time, and she was laying in bed. And so her friends came to her and they tried to cheer her up and tried to cheer her up. Her friends were trying to comfort her, but she's too upset. They say she's torturing herself. So then she gets notice that Arviragus is coming home. But she goes to the seaside to look out for him, but she sees that there are these huge black rocks in the sea. And she's worried about him because she knows that these rocks have caused countless deaths for people, and their ships have crashed on these rocks. So she says she'll be sad until these rocks are completely gone. And she says, like, why did God, who makes all these perfect things, make these destructive rocks? So she prayed to God to sink the rocks, and he did not. So her friends saw that she was really, really sad, and so they took her to live in a garden, as one does when their friends are sad, and they sing and dance and party, except for Dorigen, who's just sad all day. And there in the garden, there was a really, really talented squire who has been in love with Dorigen for his whole life, basically, but he wouldn't tell her because she was so in love with Arviragus. The squire's name was Aurelius. But he spent this entire time pining for Dorigen, as Echo in Greek mythology pined for Narcissus, but didn't tell him. And finally he broke and he told her, he says, with a word you may slay me or save. And he gave Dorigen this power to either save him or slay him based on her reaction to how much he loves him. So basically she slayed him. He told her how much he loved her, and she said, I could never be unfaithful to my husband. She says, what pleasure can a man in his life who would go love another man's own wife? And she has a little bit of pity on him and says that if he is able to make all the rocks on the coast of Britain disappear, then she will perhaps love him. He goes away really sad because there's obviously no way he can do that, and he becomes as depressed as Dorigen had been when Arviragus was gone. So then he prays to Apollo for a really long time that he will ask his sister Luciana to make a flood that will cover the rocks for 2 years and then send the rocks down to hell. Obviously Apollo does not comply, and so Aurelius just lays in bed, really, really sad, not telling anyone what's wrong because he doesn't want to admit it, except for his brother. And his brother, wanting to help Aurelius, remembers his schoolmate from college, and he was reading books. He was reading books of natural magic, and he decided to find his old schoolfellow who was studying the natural magic to help him make the rocks disappear, because the people who studied natural magic could make illusions and appearances. And so he and his brother traveled all the way to the city, and before they got to the city, a clerk came out and he said, I know why you're here. And so they followed him to his house, which obviously was magical. I mean, they obviously knew that he was magical because he knew how they were there. And he said he would do their bidding for no less than 1,000 pounds, which was a lot back then. So then the wizard is checking the stars and the sun and the moon positions to see when is a good time to do this. And eventually he does it. He makes the rocks disappear in an illusion. And Aurelius goes to temple to pray goes to a temple of Apollo because he promised Apollo that he would go to pray, and he meets Dorigen there. And Dorigen is like, oh my gosh, the rocks have disappeared. And he's like, yeah, they have. Will you love me now? And she's like, oh my gosh. And so she goes away and cries for 3 days because Arviragus, her husband, is out of town. And Arviragus comes back and sees her really sorrowful. And he's like, what's wrong? And she tells him, and she says that he says that truth is the most important thing that someone can have. And so she must go and comply to her vow that she made. But she says that she goes to Aurelius and decides that she'd rather die than be defiled by a man she doesn't love. And so she told him this, and the squire takes pity on her. The squire takes pity on her and says that he will let her go because he feels like that she has come to do her duty, but she's so sad about it to the point of wanting to die, and her husband was very polite about it, so he takes pity on her and says, you don't have to love me. And so basically Aurelius just spends the rest of his days in doom and sadness and depression, but Arviragus and Dorigen live happily ever after in love and happiness. The end.